Okay guys, welcome back. So now we're going to take a look at creative writing. So as well as answering comprehension questions and doing analytical writing, there is also a creative writing section on the English language paper. So we're going to take a look at that right now. The two main things we're going to look at, we're going to look at descriptive writing and we're also going to look at narrative writing as well, and strategies for creating a good, strong, interesting narrative. But first of all, we'll take a look at descriptive techniques. Okay, so first up, let's just do a little bit of work on planning. Now, this is something that I did mention in one of the introductory videos. It's super important that you do plan your work. And the process that I advocate is a two-step process. And I'll explain the reasons for that in a second. So step one is to brainstorm. And this is the creative phase. This is when you're just going with any association, any idea that you come up with. So let's say you were asked to do a story about travel. You might branch off, a few different things: holidays, school trip, even living abroad, and then maybe branch off these your different experiences, different points that you could mention. You might mention something like culture shock as well, or adapting, all these different things that you could talk about. So that would be step one. You're just associating freely. You don't censor yourself at all. Any random idea that comes into your head, just put it down. And you're just trying to get down as many ideas as you can, go off in as many different directions as you can. Okay, so that's step one. Step two is to then order your ideas, so that we kind of take off the creative hat and now we put on more of an analytical hat, and we're kind of like the editor at this point. We're thinking, okay, well, which of my ideas are strong ideas, which of them are going to work well, and maybe just circle those, and the ones that you just don't think are going to fit, you can just leave those. The next part, after you've selected which ideas you're going to use, you're going to want to also order them as well. So you might put them in an order. Okay, I'll mention this first, this second, this third. That I would suggest doing that. So let's just kind of have a go at that process just over here. So let's say I was writing a story about travel. I could look at holidays, school trips, but I think the one I would probably choose would be this one. I would choose living abroad, as that's an experience that I've had. And I would maybe think about, which countries I could mention. Okay, France or Spain. Let's go for Spain. That was an exciting one. And would develop things in that direction. So that might be the first thing that I'm going to put. Okay, next up, I could mention adapting to the local culture. That's really a good thing to mention. And then perhaps third, culture shock as well. Anytime you do go and live in a different country, normally at some point you'll get something that is kind of shocking to you, just really is something you're not used to. That's what you call culture shock. So yeah, that's what you would do there. I've brainstormed a few different ideas on the topic of travel, and actually now started to refine things down, started to edit things down. So that's the approach I would advocate for planning. Two-step approach. First of all, brainstorm, and second of all, order your ideas. And the reason we do it in two different steps is because when you're brainstorming, you're accessing a more creative part of your mind, which is more going from one association to the next, kind of free thinking. There's room for random thoughts. There's no boundaries on what you can or can't put down at that point. So that's accessing one part of your mind. And then we go on to step two. We kind of stop accessing that creative element and we go into a different part of the mind. We go more into the kind of logical, rational, ordering aspect of our minds. And I think that actually does more or less resonate with this kind of left brain, right brain idea. One side of the brain being more creative, more associative, and another side being more rational, kind of more logical. So that's how I advocate planning. I think it's a really good way to do your plan. And you can do your plan very quickly. I just did a little plan on the fly there that only took, a couple of minutes. You can do a solid plan in 5 minutes, no problem at all. We'll move on to the next section here. So first of all, just looking at description and looking at how you would want to describe a scene or a scenario. The go-to technique is the technique of 5 senses. So this may be something you've touched upon in the past, but I really want to re-emphasize how important this is. So sensory description is very powerful. Obviously we take in the world via the 5 senses. So when you actually see a sensory description, you read a sensory description, it's very easy to picture things, to imagine things. So that's something that we definitely want to incorporate into our work. Okay, so let's look at sight first of all. Arguably sight is the predominant sense. I think a huge part of our brain is actually designed just for visual processing. So this is a really important one. This would be the first thing you want to focus on. What are the visuals? So you're looking for things like colors, shapes, movement, and any other visual cues, visual description. And you want to go into as much depth as you can there. That's really going to help you to build up a good picture. Okay, next up would be probably sound. That's probably the second most relatable sense in terms of literary description. Obviously we've got different things we might want to include, but don't be afraid to include silence or obviously different noises as well. Okay, so sound is a fairly straightforward one. It's nice to incorporate into your descriptions as well. Okay, so next up is touch. You might want to think about things like, temperature. That's an interesting one. The ground. How do things feel underfoot? What's going on there. You can also argue that your internal feelings come into a sense of touch as well, because there's a kind of physical element there. But we'll go on to feelings in a different section. That's kind of something it's worth looking at in and of itself. Okay, and then the last two, taste and smell. These are obviously secondary, and these are less important, but that doesn't mean that they're not impactful if you use them. You want to focus on sight first and foremost, then sound, and then possibly touch as well. Taste and smell may also come into it as well. So whenever you're stuck about what to write, all you really have to do is think about the scenario that's going on and then just begin to incorporate some sensory description. So what can you see? What are the shapes? What are the colors? Are there any sounds? Is there any kind of movement in the scene? And is there any feeling going on as well? Is there temperature or any other type of feeling going on? And that will definitely get you going with your description. So this is an absolutely central technique. Okay, most story writers will tend to incorporate quite a bit of description into their work, and they will focus in on the senses. And there are some story writers who really are much more action focused and actually minimize description. But generally speaking, it is something that's going to play a huge part in any type of narrative as well. Okay, so let's just move on and have a go at an exercise related to the 5 senses technique. So what I want you to do is to think about an interesting place that you have been in the last year, maybe even in the last week. And I want you to describe it using the 5 senses technique. So describe the visuals, describe anything auditory going on, describe any physical feelings, and then also smell and taste as well. So what I want you to do is just to spend 10 minutes on this exercise and write at least 2 or 3 sentences per sense. So we're going to go with sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. And I want you to, as I say, write a couple of sentences for each of those. I just want you to get practicing using this technique. So just pause the video and spend 10 minutes on this exercise. Okay, so hopefully you found that technique useful. Hopefully you found that you're actually able to describe things reasonably well using that technique. Don't just kind of watch this video straight through without doing the exercise. Do make sure that you do the exercise. It is the really kind of crucial part of the video. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to take a look at thoughts and feelings. They're a really important part of description and creative writing as well. So I'll see you in there, and we will continue on this work on creative writing.